The story follows two different protagonists, and they're both coming into a dark situation from different angles. And that situation is that a chat show host, so if you imagine a Jimmy Fallon type, has created a bit in his show called The 10 Worst People in New York. And the audience in the studio and the audience at home can vote for who goes onto the list. So they will vote from anyone from the baseball player who isn't batting the average they'd like, all the way through to, a corrupt city politician or a real estate mogul. Read into those two examples what you like. But the idea is that once this list has taken hold and captured the imagination of the city, people on the list start to die. When the first one dies, it's a big story. When the second one dies, it's a much bigger story. Now people are thinking, well, could this be some kind of strange suicide pact? Is this about individuals who are on the list suddenly having a moment of clarity and realizing, if I'm on this list and people hate me that much, I must be a terrible person. So they've understood, the error of their ways. Is it even more sinister than that? And that's really the backdrop for the story. And the idea evolved over time, but I think it was through a discussion with my agent, actually, that we came up with really nailing down the fact that this list has to be organic and it has to be real. But the names on the list are, as you can imagine, not entirely organic. They're not there purely through chance. So not only are people on the list dying, but people are being put onto the list for a reason that you only learn towards the end of the book. I'll start with Alex, because in a way that's the more traditional take on a thriller. She's an FBI agent. She's in her 50s. She has lost her husband recently. She's suffering from severe headaches and stress. And she picks up a sense that there's something wrong with one of these deaths of one of these 10 people in New York. And people don't take her particularly seriously at first. And even when they do take her seriously, they don't really like the way she's thinking about it. They think she's on the wrong track. So she starts pursuing or entering into the situation purely as part of her job. She's encouraged to back off. She's encouraged to drop the case. She doesn't. She gets more deeply involved. And as she gets more deeply involved, she collides with the other main character in the story, who's Jacob. So Jacob is a young British filmmaker. So he's essentially a sort of younger, better looking, smarter version of me. And he arrives to hopefully to find his estranged sister. So he has a plan to make a film. He wants to catch up with his brother-in-law, but really the reason he's there is he loves his sister. He hasn't spoken to her for years. She has a history of very unusual behavior, and she cut him off 5 years ago, didn't tell him why, no reason, no contact. So that's really why he's there. Now, as he starts to get closer to her, he suspects that she's in some kind of danger or trouble. And of course, the trouble and the danger that she's in is connected to Alex's investigation, connected to the 10 worst people in New York who are now dying. And so it's inevitable that Jacob and Alex, who are coming into this from different angles, are eventually going to meet. And there'll be sort of fireworks when they do. Some of them are the same. Some of them remain. And in fact, that is really part of the story, is how come some of these people who are bad, but they're not that bad, why are they on this list? And how come they're not getting knocked off the list? And that's when Alex certainly starts to suspect that there might be more to the mechanism for how people get onto the list than initially meets the eye. But I wanted it to be a mix of people who almost anyone would immediately recognize as a villain, and some other people who are perhaps a little more nuanced. So they're all none of them are people you would necessarily invite over for dinner, but some of them are people you might want to have a beer with. It could be an interesting evening talking to them. You probably wouldn't give them your phone number or your home address at the end of the evening, but these are interesting people, and like all villains, they don't know they're villains, so they feel they're moving through the world, doing what they need to do, taking the opportunities presented to them, and they certainly don't feel like they're the villain in their own story. Having Alex and Jacob work together was probably one of the most enjoyable things to try and think through. So obviously she has vast resources. She has not only a work partner, but the resources of the FBI. And even if her boss thinks she shouldn't be on the case and she's meeting obstacles, etc., she still has access to all sorts of information and databases, etc., that most people don't have. So that in itself was fun to learn about what that might look like. What does a manhunt in New York City look like with the FBI? There was some great fun research there. Jacob, on the other hand, is a British transplant to New York. He doesn't have a support system there beyond his sister, who he can't find. So when he ends up on the run, he's learning everything for the first time. So he doesn't know, for example, that telephones in the street have been replaced by link machines. He has to learn this somehow. He's going into internet cafes or cafes where he can use a computer, or hotel lobbies, in order to find things out, quick Googles, and he has to get out of there before anyone spots him. And although he knows the city a little bit, it's very alien to him. So again, there was a lot of fun in thinking about, having lived there for 5 years, what would you do if you were on the run? If you had a limited amount of money, if you didn't dare use your credit card, if you didn't know anybody in the city, but you had your own agenda, there were people you needed to find, people you wanted to speak to, things you needed to do, but even getting a cab was fraught with danger, especially at a certain point in the book when his picture is made public. And now, anyone potentially could spot him and call the cops. I mean, interestingly, even 2 years or 3 years on from when I wrote the book, it might require an update. I think facial recognition is now very common in New York. In London, cameras are everywhere. Almost every street is covered with cameras. New York, less so still. But even now, as you say with Mangione, I think things have advanced there. So there were certain things I had to think through. There were certain places where I knew that facial recognition technology would be used, and other places where I was fairly confident it wouldn't. Streets you could walk down where it won't pick you up, and if you walk into Penn Station, it's much more likely to catch you there. But the real thing is, and you see this in almost any TV program you watch now or book you read, it's the mobile phone. That's the dramatic problem you have to solve for. So this is one of those things, when you notice it, you can't stop noticing it. But the number of TV shows or books where the denouement, the finale, happens underground or in the hull of a ship, somewhere a phone signal won't work, in the middle of the woods. Because the problem with any hunting, chasing scene is someone would make a call and say, yeah, I'm here. And someone will come and pick them up. So you have to take that ability away from the characters. Their phone has to not work, or be destroyed, or be taken away from them, or they have no signal, or it's too far to reach. You kind of have to maneuver the characters into a situation where the technology can't help them. Unless, obviously, the technology is the point, and you're trying to make the point that that's how they're winning. But most of the time, you want it to be a person-to-person struggle at the end, particularly at the end of the book. And you have to do some pretty extravagant gymnastics these days to put people in a situation where they wouldn't immediately be recognized, where they couldn't immediately call for help, where it wouldn't immediately be possible to find them by tracking their phone or something else.